Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. I'm Steve Smith along with
Yvonne Ozerets.
And on the other end, Dave Anderson. Dave, thanks for helping out again. We're going to talk tennis.
Yeah, excited to be here again. Looking forward to a good conversation.
242. California. Let's talk junior tennis and basics and fundamentals and tactics, but let's do it via the Easter Bowl. Why don't you start off? Tell us about your trip out west.
Yeah, I got back end of the week going out to the Easter Bowl, and it was a lot of fun. I hadn't been out to that tournament for quite some time, but used to go all the time. And, it's always great to see players you work with in their natural habitat in the tournament, but it was also fun just to see the climate of what are supposed to be the best players in America. If anything, it kind of raised more concern from people like us who are coaching the game and, the welfare of the game. I think that there was certainly a lot of positives to the tournament, but then from a tennis standpoint, I think that there's just so much on display that, gives one a good reason for concern.
I know our listeners want us to circle back. Many people told us to talk about nuts and bolts, X's and O's. But let's just go with some basic questions. What about the weather?
Well, I mean, the 12s, 14s began on the weekend prior to the 16s, 18s, which kicked in on a Tuesday. But, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the weather was brutal out of nowhere, 100 degrees, near 100 a couple of days, and actually 100 and something one day. And nobody could really prepare for it. It went back into the 80s the next day on Thursday and Friday and fairly mild, but, the weather was brutal. I mean, kids, you could just tell. I don't even know if it's a fitness issue with many of them. It was just hot, and it was hot early. There was no escaping it unless you had an 8 a.m. match. On top of that, the wind. We remember that epic match with Nadal and Alcaraz out there, where it was almost like they couldn't toss the ball up, and they had periods of wind like that, almost daily it seemed in the time that I was there, and the wind was stirring up so much dust in the desert that it was the first time I'd ever seen it. I'm sure you have, Steve, but they canceled the tournament one day for an air quality alert.
Yeah, air quality. I can remember way back in the 80s living in Southern California, smog alert. Stay indoors today.
Yeah. So it was pretty hard to breathe. But, play resumed and they got it all in but despite the air and the wind and everything, it's incredible venue. I don't know. I was trying to think of how many years it's been out there. I know that we remember it in the early years at the Doral in Miami.
Yeah, it certainly moved around. Coming back to climate, a young gal we work with from Minnesota was out there. It's just, if you don't go early, if you're not out there for several days beforehand, it's pretty tough to just think of the adjustments that people have to make from places like Minnesota going out to Southern Cal.
Yeah, I don't know that. I think you can adapt to it a little bit. I think that you hopefully have done your homework as much as possible with fitness going in, and then tried to do the best job possible with staying hydrated, doing all the right things when you're on site. But I don't even know if a couple of days could have got people acclimated into that 100 stuff. We're in Texas, and it was pretty brutal from our end, even out there.
I love the wind because my opponent hates it. One time was Boca West, a beautiful place, Boca Raton, Florida. I know you and I have been there together. I saw Larry Gottfried and Manola Santana playing, and the fence blew down, and he still kept playing. And what about the costs? Entry fee, hotel fees, restaurants, rented cars, airplane fees. Pretty expensive
High,
ordeal, huh?
very expensive. I had a coach from our facility go with. We had a number of players out there, so but I went pro bono. I didn't. I just brought my wife, and Jenna and I just did what we could to help the team, and it was a nice break to do something like that. But yeah, between the hotel, the cost of the tournament I think was $159, and hotels out there. I think a lot of people have started doing what the touring pros are doing, getting Airbnbs and splitting them with another family, that kind of thing.
Yeah, then you can go to the grocery store and rule out the restaurants, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I think that some of the families out of necessity did that. Others, I think, lived the high life, and it. I know one family that drove back here from Texas because they had gotten sick and had airline and everything, and then so much going around right now that they were too sick to fly, so they drove all the way from Indian Wells to Dallas. But yeah, it's a pretty penny when you start looking at it, and for many of the people, it was brief, the tournament. I mean, it's not, to get triple crowned isn't the end of the world, but that's a healthy chunk of change because everything out there seemed to cost a little bit more than I'm used to.
Shout out to Dave Fish. We had from North Dakota, David Getz on with David Anderson a few weeks ago, and David Getz was telling me that David Fish is doing really well. He's 75, playing the senior events. I know he's
Nice.
pulling for his wife Bonnie. Her health is not so good right now, but with Dave Fish, Dave Howell put the UTR together mathematically by studying the French system. And then Dave Fish is the one who really got it launched. He always would say that, tennis needs to improve in two areas, and that's how competition is regulated and how instruction is regulated. The UTR initially was supposed to be free, self-rating, genderless, ageless. And obviously it's great to go to an event like that, but it just seems like the costs are going up and up and up and up, and what about the next question would be the format with scoring, doubles, 10-point tiebreakers, no ad. What was the format?
Yeah, no ad, 10-point tiebreakers for the doubles. I was really disappointed in the singles backdraw, playing 10-point breakers for the third. It just kills me to see that. The doubles, at least there's rationale, I guess, behind it, in that, you see that on the tour. But yeah, the scoring was questionable, I think, in my opinion. I mean, just getting people on and off in those things. One thing that was amazing, and I was walking up to the site the first night of the doubles and contrasting it to the 8 a.m. matches that were played that morning with the singles, and around the tournament desk, it was like a emotionally just it was like a morgue in the sense of the energy. There was a lot of anxiety, and you could just feel it walking in. And as we approached that same spot, 12 hours later for the first round of the doubles, it was like it was a birthday party. And I made a note of that just to bring up because, one's perception is definitely one's reality. And I think that the way that kids view singles and doubles is just radically, radically different. And obviously the way that the governing bodies view it, it's radically different too. It's perceived as a little bit of a sideshow, I think.
Was the weather alert factor in? Was the scoring shortened because of that?
No.
How about players dropping out of the backdraw? Rampant?
Yeah, it was like equivalent to the COVID virus spreading years ago. I mean, I heard people arguing with, their parents or their team, I guess you could say, about not wanting to play it. And I think the ones that did play it, I think that many of them put in half efforts, which is a shame. That point came up, and talking to a few of the kids and parents, I'll never forget being out there when Dennis Novella was the number one seed in the 14s, and I was out there with a few of the kids, Steven, you know him, Alexei and Kayvon Karimi, and Novella was the one seed, and he dropped first round, and so he had to move to the alternate site the next day, and Kayvon had a tough loss, and we were walking down the hill at Rancho Las Palmas, and you could hear Dennis Novello. I didn't know it was him at first, but as we were walking down this embankment, you could just hear the intensity state long before you could see it. And sure enough, it was Novello, and he was playing the backdraw. I mean, like it was the finals of a major event in the main draw. And I didn't see that out there too much. But I did see it out of a few kids that we brought out there, and I'm sure there were others. But I think that the perception of it just wasn't great.
I think for the parents listening, college coaches, they certainly have the savvy to get online and see how many times a player is pulled out of a tournament. The back draw, show up for experience, it ruins the whole tournament when people start pulling out because you're there for match count. How many matches can you play? Obviously, it's great to be on the championship side, but the consolation side, matches are matches, and it's too bad to hear that. How about qualifying? I mean, years ago, it used to be like, say you live in Texas, you'd have to play through the Texas section to get to the bigger tournaments outside of your section. How do people qualify for the Easter Bowl?
Yeah, it's set up differently now, and all on national ranking or things of that nature for the most part. Some kids, like the young girl who got into the finals, I think she's about to turn 16, but she finaled the 18s. I was actually going to look into her, Nadia Valdez, because her dad is a coach down in San Antonio, and he's doing what I think is very intelligent. He's primarily playing her in these PTTs, and he kind of got her out of the drama of the junior tennis for the most part. And she's been playing the PTTs really since the inception. In fact, she played the one in Newport Beach the week before. That was her tune-up. And but for the most part, it's national rankings and where they sit that way.
Oh, that's interesting. I've heard her name. Yvonne and I were in San Antonio not too long ago, and yeah, it's interesting. Like with the three juniors you just mentioned, one played at Harvard, one played at A&M, one played at Illinois.
Yeah.
With seeding, is the seeding based on UTR?
I can't answer with 100% accuracy, but again, I think that it was based on ranking. And I say that because I saw some people there were numerous times where the UTR of a particular player was higher than the seed. And there were several that crept in that, none of the players really knew too much about, and I was curious how they got entered. In particular, there was a 6'7" Russian kid that actually Mason somehow found his way through in the back, and this kid, he looked like Mensick, and I was going to do some background on him to find out kind of how he got in. He's a NorCal kid. So I think some of the kids played just enough to make sure they get into Easter Bowl, get into the zoo, and then they back out of junior tennis and try to play other things.
Yeah, for our listeners, Mason Vaughn, he was in the 16s, correct?
Yeah, first year, yeah.
Yeah, so he's been ranked one in the 14s. That's correct too, right? He's held he
was right in the top couple. I think you know, he played right up till the end of his 14s, and he was in the top couple. He double gold balled, one of the nationals, but he's one of the better 16s already.
And he's first year.
First year, yeah.
Yeah, his father Holt sent me some film of him serving, volleying, and doubles. That's good for my health. How about playing up? Like the Jimmy Connors line, play where the pressure is. I know some players were out in Southern Cal for ITFs, and some elected not to stay for the Easter Bowl. I do think some parents think, okay, USTA is for college players, ITFs are for pro players. But were you in tune with that? Were a lot of players playing up?
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned the ITF. I'm not taking a shot at the USTA, but they're out there with a group of players representing the U.S. tennis, and they're playing the J300 at the same exact location. And then those kids didn't play Easter Bowl, many of them. And I don't really understand that, just out of principle. The welfare of the sport, looking at, it should just be automatic. Because you and I we remember a time where, to get into and win the Easter Bowl was a pretty heavy thing for somebody to try to accomplish, and it was looked at like with great pride. But I feel like now, my leaving there, I left there thinking this has kind of been reduced to what now is looked at as the sectional championships for places. Winning your section used to be quite a huge accomplishment, and I know in Texas you had to play in your own age group to get endorsed for nationals.
The landscape of junior tennis has changed so much. The Easter Bowl was basically Easter vacation, spring vacation, and everybody played. It used to be obviously kids going to regular school, and some kids would play the indoors at Thanksgiving. And then some would certainly during the semester break find themselves playing the Eddie Hur Orange Bowl. But most American kids playing two nationals. There was no level 2s, level 3. So it's amazing the great players who've played the Easter Bowl, world-class, legendary Hall of Fame players that have played the Easter Bowl. Let me digress with acronyms. You got to be careful with acronyms. I once heard a comedian. I've tried to find it on YouTube. The only one I can remember is Iowa. He had an acronym for every state. Idiots out wandering around. Of course, you can change that. You can change that to intellectuals out wandering around. Iowa does, I understand, have the highest literacy rate in the country. But the USTA, this nice guy, Ivan, undeniably stupid, tragically awful. You got to be careful. We got to come up with another one, though. You got to always give it the positive. With the governing body, it does take quite a few shots. Someone, Ivan, who David knows well from years gone by, is Julian Krinsky, JKST.
Yeah.
Just killing students' time. I used to go there for summer after summer. Just knowledge short of the truth. Jewish kibbutz.
I remember that one.
Jewish kibbutz securing treasure. So, I would do that with people's names. Nina, never invite Nina anywhere. But no, that playing up. I remember Tracy Austin. She was top 10 in the world, and she was playing the qualifier to be on the Junior Whiteman Cup team. To go back, and I think so many players. I remember a parent saying to me one time their child lost in the 16s, and she goes, "I wish I put him in the 18s." I'm like, I think I'll go hit my head against the wall. But yeah, people do play up, and I think also, Connor says it so well that we talk about his age group all the time. There's so many great players from the 1952, 53 era, and just keep playing your age group. If you can work on things, you can mix it up, serve and volley. But a lot of times when kids play up, they end up being a retriever because they just counterattack. They're not venturing forward. How about Mason's group? Of course, he's in the 16s now, but how about the growth differentiation? How about the sizes like in the 14s? This kid who's 6'7". You see a lot of boys that are already shaving in
Yeah,
14s.
yeah. I mean, there you could see some what look like men among boys. Um, there in the 16 boys, there were some really pretty good sized kids, and I saw a fair amount of pretty good athletes. Um, you could really tell the athletes, and you could tell the kids who have just been hitting tennis balls forever, and become pretty good players. I mean, you could go around with a clipboard and kind of make notes on the future of many of them for sure. But the 14s, yeah, 14s and 12s. I think that I think kids are getting bigger. Either that or we're shrinking. And
I know I'm shrinking.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have too. But they just seem bigger. My wife was actually commenting on that. But you can just see the ones that are pre and post pubescent. I mean, the one, and it's just not apples to apples. And George Goldoff always said, "Why even sweat it till everybody's kind of on even playing ground?" And I mean, there were just some guys out there that you could tell were 4 or 5 years post pubescent in 16s compared to some that have just entered that stage. And the size often just gets them through the wind, not really the skill.
Well, adversity is a blessing. Actually, the person who has a late growth spurt, it's great to be challenged. Great to be challenged. I have coached some kids that have done really well years gone by. It's like Jeremy Wertzman. He went on and became number one in the NCAAs. But when he won the national 14s, I mean, he grew so much between the 12s and the 14s. I mean, so he was a good sized kid. Let's go with grips. You're getting out of California. Did you see any Hawaiian grips? They're so far over.
Yeah, I mean it. I saw a lot. I'll start with a positive. I saw a lot of great two-handed backhand. I saw on the boys and the girls side. I would say that across the board, if I had to pick one area, essential skills that I think were intact, it would be the two-handed backhand. A lot of people hitting the ball well on that side, I think. On the forehand side, in the younger age groups, it was almost 100% almost in the 12s. They were all under, between semi-Western on a conservative end over to Western. A lot of inverted racket heads at the beginning where, kids mimicking that move. I did see a couple of kids that stood out that I watched my first day there in the 12s that really were on Eastern. I mean, they were dead on Eastern forehands, and they, one of them, you could hear the difference in the tennis ball. I don't think either of them had really learned to, close the face well enough and get enough spin and margin on it, but their ball, really got from A to B in a totally different manner. And those courts out there are just beyond slow. But yeah, they neither of them went forward, but they were pretty clean. I saw a couple of kids that really grabbed my eye. That just they were really in the ballpark.
On a two-handed backhand, listeners, if you were to go to Zoo Tennis, Colette Lewis and her husband, they live in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and they started off as volunteers for that great tournament, but for well over 10 years, I mean, she puts a blog up every day. So if you want to follow American juniors that also go on and play in college, but she puts up photos. And it's amazing how many photos of two-hand backhand follow-throughs that were on during the Easter Bowl. The follow-through is the end product of the swing. We had a player today leave from Jacksonville and a player leave from Raleigh. And when they both finish on their backhand, both right-handers, two-handed backhand, if the listeners get a visual on this, the two-handed backhand is a left-handed forehand. So you release the swing from the elbows. Tip of the racket is just very slightly pointed to the left. But if you have it severely pointed to the right, now I'll go a little further with a visual. Mary Lay, who she was in charge of the Vic Braden Tennis College forever. She was the head coach. And I just remember saying, okay, freeze at the top of the follow through. And so if someone has a horizontal pull and the tip of the racket for a right-hander on a two-handed backhand, which is the left-handed forehand, is just severely pointing to the right. So from here, just drop your shoulders. And it just shows you how much you move the racket during the hit. I think one thing that happens, though, with the backhand, the kids hunting for forehands, is that their first impulse is to turn for forehand, and then they're late. And then also, too, is that just the number of backhands hit. Let me ask you this. Don't you think a lot of players don't realize that their backhand is very consistent? And their
100%.
backhand's better than the two?
I think it's almost without exception, especially when you inherit kids and they come into the program and they're running around to get their weaker side off the forehand. And the backhand's like a rock. And even when you show them on video, just their brain's wired to go left. I actually, in big letters, wrote down moving left. And assuming you're a right-hander, people were just giving tons of court away to avoid hitting a backhand when it was really the side that they could, pretty much take right off the court. They didn't have to give the ground or anything because their swing was much more compact, and they just didn't miss it. But
when the righty does move to their left, the term inside out, now it means just that, run around your backhand and hit a forehand. But the players are swinging away from their body. But even when you hit a conventional forehand or backhand, to hit true topspin, I love the Braden line. The spin is an indicator of how you swing. So I think Patrick mentioned that last week, on practice. So, that's their offense. And they ended up putting themselves way out of position, huh?
Yeah, I could count the number of delayed attacks out of the air with a conventional volley on one hand. And it just, by the time they even began to capture into the court and then wait for the ball to land to hit a swing volley, and even if they did connect on an inside out forehand, the tactical side and how it ties into the technique, and people that do have a lot of criticism for what we do, and they don't understand that we're, the whole thing about how we're trying to program in for the future. And when I watch the doubles out there, and, one kid was in our program for longer than the other, and he didn't ever really serve and stay back in doubles. And so, he came in and made some just great ankle height volleys below net level, and the path of the racket went back forward and upward. And the dad of the newer person in the program said, I just don't understand how he can do that. And I said, because he's done it. And I said, people don't understand the correlation between stroke production and strategy. I really believe that. I think a lot of people see things, but I don't think they connect the two dots. I think they don't understand that it's limited by what somebody can do with their racket.
That phrase, for our listeners, years ago, we called the junior program connection, because Dave said one time, we were all talking tennis, he said, people don't make the connection. Oh, that's certainly true. For our listeners, David's based out in Dallas at the Brookhaven facility. And certainly there's been times where his program has had more players at the Nationals, let's say the Summer Nationals, than any other program in the U.S. But why don't you expound upon this, David, with the kid who's just looking to basically hit forehands. They have a lot less to think about. And therefore, early on, they're free. They're playing better tennis than the kids teaching conventional approach volleys and the tennis math, 130 degrees, aggressive air margin, 2 out of 3, managed by stats. But why do you expand upon that? Why it's easier to have early success playing one-dimensional?
It's so weird you mentioned that, because this morning at Academy with a group of kids, I literally brought this up. I said, it's kind of like, ignorance is bliss. And I said that it's going to be much easier if you just make your mind up. There is absolutely no way I'm going to the net. And that's it. There's not a debate. There's nothing. And it's just, everything is much easier to have decision by decision. But the ceiling you put over your head is very immediate. It's not far off. And that, I use the analogy. I said it's like going to a restaurant that has like a menu that has conventional American food, burgers, chicken strips, whatever, and then they also have pizza and Italian food, and then they have steaks and lobster, and you look at it, and it's hard to pick from. And I think that when we try to, in the developmental stages, build people to be all court players, and eventually some of them will migrate one way or the other a little bit more. Some kids just naturally seem to rather be a target than have a target in front of them at the net. But I think we as coaches, we definitely have the obligation to round a player out to the best of our abilities, and it is definitely a slower process because there is more decision making. It'd be much easier if we started people 100% just going forward, because I feel like everybody eventually learns to rally, but it's just the opposite. I think that if it was just at the beginning of tennis, you just learn to serve and go, or return and go, and then you work backward from there. I think that would be an easier adjustment.
No, for certain. I remember years ago in America, when people would warm up, they'd always go to the baseline, and now they all go to the service line just for a few hits. That was something that the Canadians did. The Americans didn't do that years ago. Here's an analogy for you: Jack Sock and Roger Federer. Well, first of all, pumping Jack Sock's tires. Played high school tennis. I think he was 80-0. Never played up. Just won and won and won. From Nebraska, and I used to tell people, he's a big athletic kid. I think he might be able to play safety for Nebraska. And, actually Jack Sock knocked one of our students out, Raven Claassen, who rebuilt his game, was with us for 4.5 years and had a chance to win a Wimbledon title. He was the one who lost serve in the 5th set. Sock was playing with Mike Bryan. But I've asked people, no, Jack is not so much playing tennis, he's playing pickleball, but top 10 player in the world. So great. But who would you rather play, like Jack Sock or Roger Federer? Jack Sock might say, well, my game, I like my game. So then you could say, well, whose bank account would you rather have? And it does take longer. Like a Michael Chang, who was a great champion, you'd have to just think, well, it would have been competitive. But, if back in the day when Pete Sampras had a 2-handed backhand, so they're playing. But Pete changed his backhand to a one-hander, and it would have been a safer bet to bet on the baseliner. I think another interesting question is, like Roddick was number one in this country for a decade or close to it, and they weren't thinking about asking Roddick to play doubles. And so, I think that's also another thing too, is that how would that kid do playing doubles? How would that kid do on different surfaces? But yeah, so it was, I get in trouble for saying this. It was match after match. We say clones taught by clowns. Wasn't just two players looking to rip a forehand? No variety.
Yeah. For the most part, everybody, I think some phrases that you spoke about many times here, surplus one. And, as kids, you can see the kids that are trying to just unload, they're just literally trying to unload. And I was watching two of the better players in America in 16s, and Actually Mason lost to one 11-9. Got really, to be honest, and I don't like to make excuses, but he got a horrific call at 9-all in the tiebreaker. And but they were just, they were, to a spectator, it's going to look like these guys are tour players, the way that they were hitting the ball with speed, spin. But the rate at which the ball was being hit, because of how far back these guys were, and despite the fact that they were hitting the ball 70 plus miles an hour easily, it seemed like you had forever. And even if you hit a little short, nobody was looking to even take. It's one thing to not go into the net. It's another thing to not take bites out of the court. And I always show our kids footage of Nikolai Davydenko, who I think was an incredible baseline player who took bites out of the court at every possible opportunity. And
what do you mean by bites out of the court?
Well, I mean, if the ball, hit 75 feet versus say 72 feet, these kids I saw, they're just letting the ball come to them in the same manner. There's no adjustment north and south to try to capture a little more court. And because they have no forward intent ultimately.
That's a good point. Kids don't even move in to play a groundy on the rise.
Yeah, that was just so evident out there. And I'm not lumping everybody in there, but I saw a lot of really, really, I think, pretty talented kids that had skills that were in the ballpark, that just, they were hitting the ball, but they weren't valuing the 78 feet and the court. They just, the real estate's not valued at the same level as when you watch a lot of touring pros do a good job of it.
I think that young coaches watching junior matches, they should be able to manufacture lesson plans. What type of situational drills, even without changing someone's game. Say, okay, we're going to play sets, attack, counterattack. The player is on one side. You feed a high arcing ground stroke. I don't care how you play it. You can play a swing volley, conventional volley, but you got to come forward and play it out. So you just throw those situations at them, and instead of saying, okay, we're going to start videoing and go back to the drawing board. Some people just don't want to do that. I mean, that phrase, we got to win a player over, the parents too. For us, it's a little bit different. We have people recommend people come to see us so they know what they're getting into. But a rebuild, that's where, who came up, Jimmy Johnson's Academy out in Southern Cal, with, in one of the previous podcasts, just going back a couple of weeks, where, so someone goes to California or they go to Florida. And I remember talking to Jimmy about this many times, where, they show up and they want competition. Just like you said that your assistant, Andre, says, you're just here because we have better players. And they think that they're going to improve. You can improve by hitting with better players. If better players are hitting deeper, heavier shots, more pace, and on a higher frequency, they're more consistent. Yeah, that'll help you shorten up your swing. But that's not really, that's a trial and error approach. That's not the best way to go about it. It's like, okay, tell me my swing's too big. At the Easter Bowl, you don't really see college coaches, correct?
No, it's not.
We're so busy.
Not as much like.
We're so busy with their spring season.
Yeah, it's not like the other level ones now. I have trouble saying level ones, but the other, significant nationals. One of the situational drills, Steve, when you were talking about that I, your idea on, I think it's a good one for people to hear, on the allowing a player 60 points.
Yeah.
And, we had a boy do that the other day. I mean, I know you've mentioned it before, but one boy was 14, and in the 12s, he had been a semifinalist at the Orange Bowl, and the other boy was James Lane, Alex's son. And, it just worked out to where the younger player won because of the other player's inability to kind of sort through it in the right manner. Barely won, but won.
Yeah, 60 comes from 3 touches when you're the server, 2 touches when you're the returner. So you multiply, you're going to serve in a 6-0 set, you would serve 3 times, return 3 times. And I like to do that where you have someone, you put 3 people on a court, one person just does the tally system, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And how many shots does it take you to beat a player? Because generally people are just trying to hit the ball hard. It's just two ways to hit the ball hard and harder.
Yeah.
How about the doubles?
Yeah, I mean, hard to watch. I certainly went up and made an effort to make sure I told all the kids that were in our program with us that, I was proud of them for the way they played. I still haven't adapted to what's out there in our day in and day out practices enough and had people, on one side of the net play one up, one back. I always say I'm going to do it and I just never get around to it. But the reality is, I mean, that's what the world around them is doing. And so sometimes they're a little unaccustomed to it. And, I think Mason Vaughn, who ended up, doing well in the doubles out there in the 16s, and he was with a first time partner who, I told Mason, this kid's way better off not coming in. He didn't have any intent. He didn't want to come in. He never came in, but he hit the ball, so big off the ground. And these guys are, playing doubles, and even in the boys' side of it, pretty much like you see a lot of WTA doubles played where you have 2 big singles players on the other side, and they're just often not even returning cross court, but just unloading at the net player right away. And unless the double skills are pretty good on that side, the ground stroke tends to beat them all the time.
Yeah,
I wouldn't even consider it doubles, I hate to say.
Playing one up, one back is a good way to practice topspin lobs. The women in Miami, Diana Schneider and Mira
Andreeva. Yeah.
I mean, the topspin lobs that they're both hitting, especially Andreeva. So that's one. There's always a positive and a negative. If you're playing doubles the wrong way, you're getting to practice a lot of topspin lobs. But you have to learn to be able to play against that. Welby Van Horn, who arguably has the record of being the best player who was the most accomplished teacher. And we say teacher, someone who took beginners and they became great, great players. And there's so much recruiting and now junior tennis. But shout out to the late Fred Stolle, who just passed away recently. I believe this is accurate. I have to get our fact checker on it, Andres Barbosa. Still the only father-son combination of players that won Grand Slams, that won majors. And
yeah, I can't think of any others.
With, so that's where it's hard to tell when you're at a junior tournament how many people have had, how many coaches have they had, say they're in their 14s, how many different programs have been with different pros. That's always an interesting side of it. Another thing too that with the listeners, the hidden numbers to get to college tennis is when it's pretty much public knowledge what someone's UTR is, but they don't know necessarily what their GPA is, or they get into the scholastic aptitude test like SAT, ACT. But hats off to all the participants, hats off to all the parents, because one, they're at that national level. And, again, that's an accomplishment.
Yeah.
How big were the draws?
64.
And doubles were 32?
Yeah.
And no qualies?
No.
Yeah. So your players, so some are on a wait list and then they find out pretty much last minute too that they get in, right?
Yeah. I mean, these guys were all pretty much guaranteed in. There were several that didn't go. And like many families, money doesn't grow on trees. They just have to pick and choose.
Well, that's obviously a cost factor if they find out last minute that they're in, because then the airline tickets are more expensive, right?
Yeah, and a couple of them were just coming back from injury. One, has already signed at college and opted out, went and played a PTT the week before that, not to avoid pressure or anything, just the drama, can have a negative, toxic effect, I think, on people. You have to really thicken your skin out there and discern what's going to be productive for you or not. In what I saw, I mean, to see 14, 15-year-olds with teams, and I don't mean team of players and from a particular place, but the concept is spreading downward at such a incredible rate that people have to have everything imaginable in their corner in order to reach their goals. But their kid has never dropped down and done 100 push-ups on their own at their house, or put their running shoes on and gone running. But yet traveling with a physio, or getting on the phone with a sports psychologist, and it's a little out of hand right now. I mean, and that's being very, very modest in that statement. I think it builds the opposite of grit. You said it earlier. I mean, adversity is a blessing. And I think that a week or two ago, prepared or scared, the more the kids just they've got the inner strength in them. We just can't, as a group of adults, take it away from them by giving them everything they want, not what they need.
In communicating with Dave Fish recently, he sent me his website. I'll have to come back and mention that in the next podcast. But intelligence with character. We have this course called Tennis Intelligence Applied. It's 25 hours long. Or Yvonne told some players today with their parents here that technique is just cherry on the ice cream cone. If you don't have character, it's really not going to help you out. But you obviously saw, as the tournament goes on, it's not that it's less players, but the better players have more emotional control. Did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think that, when you take it depended on the age group, but there were some kids out there that definitely navigated the tournament in a very professional manner. You could just tell from self-talk and rituals, and then there were a far greater number who it just sounded like, kids at a McDonald's in those little balls yelling and screaming. And, I just, you don't know whether to laugh or cry. And, the amount of gamesmanship that so many of them are using, and the lack of hesitation to make a bad call. It's just like, there's some, sports should teach you about life and teach you, about character and integrity and all of those things. But, boy, it revealed a lot of people, like they were under a microscope. I mean, you saw who they were. They were showing the world who they were out there. And, I think we as coaches, I mean, it's huge, right? I believe it starts first around the dinner table at home, but, we have a chance to intervene and do a little bit of an intervention through our role in sport. And, but without the parent support, it's going to be very difficult.
Now, I can repeat this every week on the podcast as far as I'm concerned. And this, for me, was flattering. It happened at Indian Wells. So this was a pro event. So I show up, and the late Steve Johnson Sr., his son's obviously a great player. He asked if he could just hang out with me, sit and watch some tennis. But he has a great line, had a great line. Tennis will let you know who you are. It's kind of like the Fred Shearer line, tennis doesn't build character, it reveals character. But, shout out to Bob Larson, who passed away, his family, condolences with his career. He was a journalist, and it had been some time since I talked to him, but I used to talk to him on a regular basis because at one point my job was to get people jobs. I had over 100 students that were looking for jobs in the tennis teaching world. And at one time, I was offered the job to be the national coach of Puerto Rico. And I didn't take it. And, I remember Bob's advice was that I should have taken it because once you get to that international level, you're at the international level. But it's really interesting career paths. And you just think about one's junior career. And then when someone gets to be the age of 18, I tell juniors all the time, parents listening to this, when your kid's name is yelled out over and over again, they're being reprimanded. Have them thrive on criticism because they can get to the point where no one's yelling their name anymore. And they want to play college tennis. And then they get to that point where they're a junior in college, junior in high school, and, no one's knocking on the door. Tracy Austin, pro tennis will find you. But actually, a really top college tennis, that's the way it works. College tennis will find you. People ask me all the time, well, you'll be a great reference to help my child play at a top school. It will help just a little bit. The umpire, Braden, the umpire will say, ready, play. But, I'll give us a ballpark number, 1 out of 10. How many kids do you think need to go back to the drawing board? Or another way to ask it, how many of those kids, in a perfect world, if they're playing the Easter Bowl, there's a good chance they're going to get to the college level, is that when they get to college, they should redshirt and work on their game? I don't even think every other kid or 70%.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, it's up there. It's 70+%. And what you just said too, I mean, it ideally would start now because it's not just technical but it's tactical. And, I mean, boy, the deeper it gets, you better have a Herculean work ethic and, just have an incredibly strong mind to get through that because, but a lot of it, I would say easily 70%.
One of my most interesting experiences, Dave and I were in Boca Raton. It was the architect first. I was second. David was third as far as people hired. And I was really certainly out of my element doing some things off court. I was telling Gretchen Rush, who works here, I remember negotiating a $25,000 cash for Robbie Seguso and so many free rackets that he could sell from Kennex. And, Seguso, he wasn't playing anymore. But so to get him cash, I remember so many people told me that was a great deal. Of course, he wasn't thinking that way because he obviously made a lot more money as a player. But,
yeah.
But anyway, one thing I did for the late Arthur Cohen is he was in charge building a 29-court facility in Boca. Is Zena Hamilton, the founder of the Easter Bowl. And this went on for several weeks. I kept telling Arthur, she thinks it's a Super Bowl. But my job was to try to buy the Easter Bowl from her. That was a little bit out of my training. But no, it was really interesting because she was selling it. Every time we talked about the Easter Bowl, she had the history, the success, the players that had played that tournament. But I think what you said we need to talk about one more time. It's not as prestigious as it once was because of the alphabet soup, ITFs, all the different the UTR tournaments, the money UTR tournaments, kids not homeschooling. And actually in the good old US of A, we developed better players when kids were staying at home and going to everyday school and just trying to fight through their section to make it to nationals. It wasn't get your checkbook out. Like, hey, you got to homeschool, get your checkbook out. And, when the UTR first came out for Dave Fish, Dave Howell, I wrote an article that was published. And to be sensationalistic, a kid could be in Boston, seriously, and waiting to get into a tournament in Honolulu. They're going to have a level 3 nationals in Honolulu. And they have to wait to the very last minute. And they're like, Mom, I made the cut. I'm in. And it's like, get your checkbook out. And that same, I like the scenario, say first year 14s, you get the mushroom, the guy who's got pull the floppy hat down, the Aussie cap, and he's got a band on his elbow and he can't hit anything. He can just push the ball back. He's got a lob. He's not making any unforced errors. And he'll bring you in, he'll play you like a yo-yo. So like who wins? At one point with Nadal, people had shoes that matched their racket, that matched their bag, matched their headband. And like, who wins the 14-year-old kid who's just blasting that Western grip on the forehand side from way behind the baseline or the mushroom. And those matches have gone away.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
so give us some closing advice on how do you get to the Easter Bowl? It's certainly, again, congratulations to people who played. We don't want to make it sound like it's a toilet bowl, but
well, I wouldn't be in any hurry. That'd be one piece of advice, because it's just another tournament, and there's a lot of great players who just didn't really go the routes of trying to become a grade 12, grade 14, grade 16. They put it together in the latter half between 18 and 30. And but I would say this, even if it's to parents out there, that if your kid walks away with a gold ball, whether it's Easter Bowl or anywhere else, and they've really tarnished your reputation as a parent in a family by their behavior, then I think you failed. And whether that's through bad line calling, whether that's through putting out poor effort, having terrible attitude, I think that to me those are huge things. And I'm going to ask tomorrow morning. I've given everybody ample time now. They'll all be back tomorrow or Wednesday, and I'm going to ask how many people took the time to write a note. And I know what the answer is going to be before I even ask it. And I think that if you want to get there, but don't sacrifice your game in the long term for what's an imaginary kind of, that nirvana doesn't exist out in Palm Springs or anywhere. You got to build your game first, and like Tracy Austin said, the rest comes calling for you. You either have it or you don't. And I saw a lot of good tennis players, don't get me wrong, but we ate dinner the night before with Dave Sievertson, a senior legend in the world in tennis, now 74 years old, and we were watching some of the 12s and 14s, and I had one of the young boys beside me who, again, he can play a little bit. He made it to the semis of the 12s in the Orange Bowl, but he went out there and got triple crowned. He made it bigger than it was, and he was playing like he was playing against Federer. And I told him, I said, Dave Sievertson isn't going to lose a set to anybody on this whole row of court. And the guy said, no way. And I said, I'll bet my house on it. And, it is what it is. I saw a lot of kids. I mean, the three areas, the neck up, I would say more than 70% needed a lot of work on that. But I think that work is caused by a lot of incomplete games from the shoulders to the waist. And then I did see a lot of athletes who could run. And some of them are there just because of that.
You and many, many other people sent me the photo. Tell us about the Welby wall.
Yeah, well, I got in trouble. I sent you a video, and the matches hadn't even begun yet, but they were warming up, and an umpire quickly scurried up. That's why the video had to stop suddenly. You can't film when the kids are out there. And but it was great to see that wall. I think in the video, when I was given a little bit of a background on it, not background, but I just said it, I guarantee you that there's just a very limited number of kids who have ever even hit that, any wall. And it is kind of shocking. And I had the chance to talk to Sina Hamilton out there one year, quite some time ago. And it was a very fun conversation, but she said, this one academy, which was having a lot of success, she said, you know what their secret is? And I said, what? And she goes, they actually watch tennis. She goes, imagine that, kids actually watching tennis. And it is funny because, Miami was going on during that. And I don't know. I just like keeping up with the sport, but it is shocking to me. It's really shocking to me how few kids watch tennis. And, you won't find the basketball and football kids in America missing big games, and hockey playoffs are coming up in a short time. And if you love your sport, you're going to do a lot of things naturally. The passion-driven thing.
Let me come back to Welby, but Welby lived at Indian Wells, but so I remember being out there hanging out with Welby. But with I was there one time with Vic Braden, and Vic said it's a classic line. He goes, "Well, the losing player just might as well mail in the scores, because if you're playing someone who's a little bit better on the baseline than you are, and you have no options, match over. You gotta have game. You got to be able to." Bill Tilden, match play and spin of the ball, is that someone's really good with topspin from the baseline. You got to be able to play at the net. But for the listeners, Charlie Passerelle was one of the founders, owners of the tournament, Indian Wells, for years and years. And I believe he sold it for $22 million to Larry Ellison. Of course, Larry Ellison's done so much with it since then. But Charlie Passerelle was taught to play tennis by Welby Van Horn. Welby Van Horn always had people hit the backboard. So Welby, at one point, before he came back where his sons live in Florida and was in a nursing home, extended care. He lived at Indian Wells. Charlie set him up, and Welby did very, very well financially. So Welby Van Horn was, it's amazing how many people are watching. And I always think about people like Jack Kramer and Arthur Ashe when they were commentating on TV. What would they say about today's game? But yeah, 15 minutes on the backboards equivalent to an hour balls hit. I ask people all the time, those portable backboards, we brought it back from the 80s. It was called the Tennis Mate. And within the first year, 6 companies copied it. So you can find a portable backboard. And then I ask kids that have them how often you use it. 40 balls in 1 minute. And come on, you got to hit 200 balls a day minimum, 5 minutes a day. Everybody can find 5 minutes, but kids get those backboards and they don't use them. But finding a wall, whether it's, behind an elementary school, you've got to find a wall to hit against. The wall will never miss. And then if you start doing your homework, it's amazing how many great players spent endless hours. The bigger the dream, the bigger the work ethic, hitting on a backboard. Just a few comments before we sign off with Miami. What do you think of this player who beat Djokovic last night, 6-6? I stayed up and watched that.
Yeah, I did too. I broke my curfew. But
did you break your fast? Your no Mountain Dews? Did you pump some Mountain Dews to stay awake?
No, I found there were actually some in the one of the convenience stores out there, and I was shaking so hard to grab it. Luckily, my wife was with, and she yanked me out of it. But yeah, one last thing before Miami is it was amazing to me how on the transition game, I think how we would say a transition game getting, from A to B to C, but it was amazing to me at all levels how many players opted to just play drop shots instead of the pro shots in what we call the yellow zone. That really, really, really stood out. I mean, that was actually, I've given Shane Van Zandt a lot of praise here, but that was a habit that was hard for him to break. He got into that habit and became a very, very good junior doing that in the early age groups. And, he had to really reroute that, but it wasn't like it wasn't like it was just able to be broken. He always opted to do that. And, yeah, no transition. No, I watched Mensick. I think what Djokovic said when he hit with him, 4 or 5 years ago, he said he predicted he'd be one of the top players in the world soon. Of all the people he doesn't mind losing to, he said he would certainly be one of them.
I think the story I heard last night that I maybe lost in the Australian Junior final, but Djokovic took a liking, invited him, practiced, and helped him out, and mentored him. But we're always telling juniors, talk softly and talk slowly. I mean, guessing his brain type, it's like, this guy might be an ISTP. I mean, when he's being interviewed, very gracious when he won and how he handled it. But also to work on your serve, get the toss out to the right. Anything else on Miami?
No, I mean, I thought it was amazing. And if I read the stats right, 93% winning behind the second serve. I felt like Miami went on for like 3 weeks for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe it was just me and the period I was in trying to do a bunch of different things. But, if I had to, I've always liked Indian Wells compared to Miami, but for some reason, I have no particular reason why. But I thought, the way Mensik played, I love to see how Monfils is still digging his way through draws. I love watching him. I think he's great for the sport, just from a entertainment value and energy and positivity. And on the women's side, I think it was nice to see Raducanu make a bit of a resurgence and finding her way back again, closer and closer to the top. And Sabalenka just proved that when she has her A game, that there's probably very few people that can get on the court with her on the other side. It was a good tournament. I think I love the Sunshine Double. I like that period.
Sabalenka, I've said for years, the only person who could beat Serena at one point was Serena. Sabalenka's doing a much better job gathering herself, but what a lesson on just being aggressive, stepping up. You have a better chance of getting the racket face aligned at the hit by swinging fast and swinging slow. Jim Laird, you're better off to be a one-ball blast than a forever push. You got to have the loose shoulder. You got to swing. And with her shoulders, I mean, hats off to those athletes. Boy, they're in the gym. They're working out. But look at Pegula too. I mean, obviously she got overwhelmed with power, but she's in the finals. She actually comes out of a great base. Her game is very solid, very, very fundamentally solid.
Pegula looked fitter for sure, it seemed.
Yeah, I was told by a gentleman with the USTA, trying to blank Paul from the Netherlands, worked at the USTA 3 different times. At one time, Merklin's job
Paul Roeder,
thank you. Mark Merklin's job was to make sure that James Blake didn't eat junk food. That was Paul Roeder told me that. So she's definitely with someone who's known for his fitness. But the 7-6, 7-6 score, obviously it's close. The tiebreaker, I think it was 14 aces to 7 aces, but it was pretty much double, the free points he was getting. But also too, it's 37 years old, almost 20 years apart. It was actually almost 19, 18 and change. But there's a few forehands in both tiebreakers where Djokovic, it's a lifting game. If he could, 37 years old though, what a great effort. With the doubles, certainly the women's doubles, it was great to see that featured because everybody's waiting to watch the men's. But great competitors. We'd like to see more conventional doubles being played. Speaking of the Indian Wells, one more thing. Here's a question for you guys. What's the name of the German player that looks like Andy Fitzel? Andy Fitzel looks like him. Kohlschreiber. There you go. So I was in Indian Wells one time. And it's like, okay, the players you're with, they've got the day off, and this is the pro event, and there's so much to watch. But I was in the players' lounge. Had Kohlschreiber, he was in there. We just watched Agassi and Sampras were playing him. It was an old match on TV, and I just couldn't pull myself away from it. It's like, I'm watching this. But I think for next podcast, we'll put it up to Yvonne. He's got to come up with a better, the flip side of the acronym for the USTA. like unbelievably super. You got to come up with another one. We just got to be politically correct on that.
I'll get a good one.
Yeah, that's right. I haven't done that in a while. Anderson's.
Yeah, I'll come up with a beauty.
I try to work Anderson and Foreman now. We haven't done that in a while, but he's a poet and he doesn't know it, but he can show it. Because I would get the trash talk going between those two via text messages or whatever. And I think Anderson, as a professional writer, just follows him around.
I do. Yeah. No, good old Freddie.
Yeah. Reunion. We had to get Freddie around. With actually, I've been invited to go to Hamburg, Germany in October. And I have to look up Freddie. You should come with me. Let's go do a clinic in Germany.
I should go. That'd be fun.
You also said that you're going to Australia. We should do that.
Yvonne, I know. Let's do all of it.
Yvonne, why don't you give us 3 wrap-ups, 5 wraps-up? We must have said something that was worth repeating, especially Anderson.
Yeah, let me pick some out.
He's thought out. He's from North Dakota. He's in ND, North Dallas. We got to get David Getz back on.
I personally enjoyed when you, Anderson, said that you were walking up and you said you can feel the anxiety for the singles rounds. It was like a morgue. And then for the doubles, it was like a birthday party.
Yeah, it was. That is real.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. And how there's not much intensity in the back draw. Let's see. I'm just going to pick a few at random here.
As you're thinking about that, I'll tell everybody that when I was a young kid, I had a job in a cemetery. My grandfather used to say he's got thousands of people working underneath him. And then he also said people were dying to work where he works. But actually, up north, when someone dies, they put him in the morgue because the ground's frozen. Usually they use a backhoe, but I can actually say that I've dug some graves.
Here are a few more. Most players' backhands is their more solid shot. Players don't value court real estate. I love how you said that. Dave, a few more here. 70% of the players need to go back to the drawing board, both technically and tactically. Build your game first, then the rest of the game comes calling for you. And talk softly, talk slowly. Those are a few.
Here's something we had on Facebook. We do have something on Facebook on a daily basis. Outrageous opinions or frightening facts. And no, a lot of times the frightening fact, I don't think it's an outrageous opinion, is if a kid has no service motion, the light at the tunnel is a train coming right at him. And there are players, we don't want to be doom and gloom, pessimistic. Once again, it takes a lot. The parents, to get a kid to that level, so much effort, so much blood, sweat, and tears, money, sacrifice. But there's some kids who probably play the Easter Bowl, probably is a weak word, so I tell kids all the time, that you could count how many overheads they hit throughout the whole tournament. They just, they weren't, and I guess one last question I could have as a bonus is, did you see any matches where people didn't even warm up volleys? They just say, no, thanks.
I didn't, but it may have happened. I didn't see that though, thankfully. Otherwise I would have had the Mountain Dew.
I've seen that at the futures level. Someone's got a rich uncle and they don't really, unfortunately, their game is not even close to trying to play pro tennis. And they say, they're asking, you want to come up? These volleys over? They go, just wave. Oh, I'm good. Makes sense. Yeah. They're not going up there anyway. All right, Davey Anderson, thanks for your time. I hope our listeners more golden nuggets for the treasure chest.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It was awesome.
Yeah. Adios, amigos.
Okay, see you later. Have a good night.
Yeah,
thank you, Dave.
242 in the books. Yvonne, thank you for putting this together. Listeners, thank you for listening for the betterment of tennis. Adios, amigos. It's the GreatBase Tennis Podcast.